Hi, this is a presentation about energy or fatigue and energy imbalances using iridology as one of the techniques to find clues into understanding where the imbalance may come from. So, well, fatigue, there's many causes or health imbalances that can bring about fatigue. And so we're going to take an approach, a high altitude approach, like trying to see different ways of thinking when faced with a patient that has got fatigue. So just before I carry on, I've got to obviously do a bit of a disclaimer. The medical field has got the control, or has been given the authority to say what is allowed and what isn't allowed. So make sure that this information is, do not follow my advice. Kind of make sure that your patients are following their health practitioners. And anyway, read the details. So, well, let's start with life throws experience at you. And think about this for a second. Everything that happens, there's multiple ways of handling it, but there's usually about two main ways. The first one is you hit that experience back and you start playing and you start learning and you start growing from that experience and gaining from it. Or you actually collide with that experience. And fatigue is often one of the debris that comes from one of those collisions. Now, don't get me wrong, kind of collisions are all part of learning, and everybody falls down when they're learning how to walk, and it's part of the learning process. So it's not all bad. It's when it's repetitive that you start getting scar tissue. If you have indigestion on a regular basis, you're going to start having a weakening of your digestive tract. And that's the kind of scarring I'm talking about, is the repetitive difficulties, collisions that are encountered in life. Now, I think iridology is brilliant to trying to find information about this scar tissue, or a history of the collisions. It records what you inherited from your parents and grandparents, like the genetic aspects of health, and at the same time what's happening in this life, in the person whose eyes you're looking at. So it's a mix, and there's still a lot of research that needs to be gone into advancing our understanding of exactly what we're seeing in the iris. But there's quite a lot of people with quite a lot of health experience that have said quite a bit and taught their experience. So yeah, I'm a big fan of iridology. So here we've got some iris photos, and we're going to look into them. So when you're looking at this finding clues type aspect of it, and you can use iridology, naturopathy, Chinese medicine, you name it, on one level it's all just sweeping kind of the problem underneath the carpet if you're not prepared to address the real issue, and that is getting the person aware of, like, helping them to avoid these collisions, to help them avoid the causes of these imbalances. And part of that is how you change the processes the person has in place, their life choices, their habits, their whatever brings about these collisions, bringing about a new process that enables that collision to not be a collision and be part of a growing experience, and something that is nourishing, if we can use that word. So why am I interested in iridology? And well, I've got the key thing is I want more research to be done in iridology, and we started off a project a few years ago, which is Iris Lab. We're developing iris equipment to be able to take very good quality photos of the iris, so we can do more research into that. and to be able to do research, you have to have reliable photos that are always of the same level of quality, the same type of lighting, so that you can see before and after, etc. So that's one of the things, that's one of my projects. So anyway, getting back to fatigue, where do we begin? It's such a vast subject. We're going to try and look at 3 areas or 3 parts. So having a quick look at what is energy, and then some cornerstones, some key techniques or areas to be aware of when looking at a person's health situation, and then some strategies to tackle them. So first of all, fatigue, very complex. Do a bit of research online or a bit of search in a search engine, and you'll have tons of statistics. And where do you begin? It's quite complex. Fatigue, or the exhaustion of energy, it's important to have a look at what energy actually is. And it was a bit confusing, actually. I tried to actually figure out, like, I've got an engineering background, and you can always break something down into smaller parts to be able to gain more understanding on it. But with energy, it was a bit difficult. So, like, the first elements about energy is that we don't actually know what energy is. We know what energy does, and we know what shape it takes on. Like you can more or less be broken down. Like the deepest you can go is you can have potential energy and kinetic energy. And even if you kind of take Einstein's theory into account, everything is energy. Like even matter, depending on how the speed at which it's resonating, or I'm not sure if that's the right wording. Everything comes down to pure energy, and something in motion, which is kinetic energy, and energy that is stored. So you can have chemical energy. Anyway, so it's a little bit difficult to understand. Nobody really knows exactly what it is. But the one thing we're sure of, and there's a energy law they call conservation of energy, the law of conservation of energy, which states energy can be transformed, but it can't be created or destroyed. So think about that for a second. The universe has got a certain amount of energy in different shape, format, and it's all being recycled, transformed, but it's never being, like, it never disappears, and it never is created from scratch. So here on Earth, like, just think of it as a flow. So we've got energy coming from the sun, and there's a bit of energy here already here on Earth, and kind of there's the vegetation, animals, and we get our energy from that, and we transform that energy, like from what we eat, into work we do and life experiences. So just think of the word flow. It's a flow of energy, and if there's a disturbance in that flow, that disturbance, that's the interesting part of it. So that when I saw this image, this straight away reminded me of an iris. You get these fibers in the iris, and there's a disturbance in those fibers, and that disturbance is actually what, as a practitioner, that's what you're going to be looking for. You've got to try and understand what this disturbance in the energy is. Like Yoda talking about feeling the disturbance in the force. Well, that's exactly what, as a practitioner, your goal or your aim is in a consultation, is to figure out what is the disturbance. Any disturbance, any health imbalance, there's a flow of energy, and you got to figure out that disturbance. So the energy, the areas of health, like the ways, the techniques I use, I find very useful to try and understand or get more in-depth understanding of what's going on. These are the key areas that I'll bear in mind when doing my research or asking questions and trying to figure out the root cause of something. So, the miasms, or the miasma, the levels at which the imbalance might be taking place, the target, how to kind of look at, how can I explain it? What to target, kind of how do you target the problem? How do you target, like how do you find a solution? Anyway, you'll explain it. Yeah, I'll explain it a bit more in a second. And the chakras. And there's a lot that has been said in the past about chakras, but we'll have maybe a new look on it, or old look. So anyway, getting back to miasma, think about any disturbance will take on one of three types of disturbance, formats. I don't know how you could say it. The three main ones are depository, wasting away, or malignant. And you can take any health imbalance, any disease, anything, and it fits into one of those three categories. Now, one, like a depository type imbalance, might bring about a malignant type imbalance afterwards, but somewhere in there there's a main type of disturbance. Let's take, for example, heart problems, or like thickening of the blood vessels. There's a depository element to that. There's a thickening. There's something happening that's depositing substances in places where you don't want them to deposit. Somebody who's overweight, there's an obvious depository something going on there. Wasting away. Think of being short on magnesium. There's a wasting away of a substance that the body needs, and your body's not holding on to it. Malignant is where you've got you've lost, or some cells have lost their intelligence. They're not actually playing part with the whole system. They're doing their own thing. They're being encapsulated, or they're encapsulating themselves. So they've lost their connection with the rest of the body, and they're doing their own thing. So all imbalances fit in there, and it's actually important to figure out, with whatever issue you've got, where does it fit. And with fatigue, it's the same thing. You've got to figure out what's the environment that this person, what's their inner environment that's bringing about this fatigue. Is it something depository, wasting away? So this is something key to bear in mind. Now, we can probably talk many hours about each one of these and techniques to move forward, and that will be the subject of another talk like this. But anyway, that's one key area to bear in mind. The next one is, what level is the disturbance happening? Is it on a physical level? Is it just the fact that somebody has got a heavy diet, or is lacking something in their diet? Or is it like a traumatic kind of an accident, or something physical? Is it on a mental level? Like the origin of an imbalance or a disturbance could actually be mental. It's like a thought pattern, emotional. Okay, this is another kind of subject that can take many hours of discussion and delving into, and you probably have your own experience and awareness of this. But this is another area that you have to bear in mind when it comes to fatigue, is if the origin is on one level, try and tackle it on that level. But sometimes it's difficult to tackle, like going into emotional things can be quite deep and heavy, and maybe you don't want to go into that. But sometimes working on another level can influence another level. So just an awareness about the levels is very important. The third aspect is how you target the problem. Now, you can just, for example, some of you probably got some experience with osteopathy, or you've seen an osteopath, and a very good osteopath will never just crack a vertebra back into place and say, job done. Because most of the time that vertebra will be back out of place within a matter of a few hours or a few days. And like a good osteopath is actually going to work on all the muscles, on the tissues, or the ligament, everything surrounding that environment. Some of them don't even do any cracking. They just know that if they've worked on the environment, the problem, like the vertebra that's out of place and creating the pain, is going to actually right itself. So the context, understanding the context, can actually help you figure out what are the forces pulling on a situation and creating the disturbance. And this is a debate that's been going on for a long time. The medical field, not always, but very often, is involved with trying to figure out the problem, trying to kind of attack the germ, attack the virus. And Louis Pasteur, one of the big guys in medical history, he was very big on kind of trying to kill the disease. And one of his colleagues of his era, who was not really in agreement with Louis Pasteur, which is Claude Bernard, whose his big thing was the environment, the milieu, they called it. And apparently, I wouldn't kind of know how to prove this, but apparently this is something Louis Pasteur had said on his deathbed. So one of his last things he said was, actually Bernard was right, the germ is nothing, the milieu is everything. And there have been quite a few doctors who really believed in this concept of working on the milieu, or the environment, the context, that they actually were they were prepared to put it to the test. And some doctors took live cholera, ingested it, and they had no problems. And they were so sure that their digestive tract, their milieu, was strong enough, and it wasn't an environment that was favorable for these cholera microorganisms. They didn't have any ill effects from it. Now, don't go ahead and start drinking cholera. I wouldn't put myself at risk like that, but there's something to be said. Like it's a very important aspect, and especially in natural health or holistic health, this milieu is a very big important thing. And some of you who may have some experience with homeopaths, with homeopathy, I mean, I'm sure you'll understand what I'm talking about. So the fourth area that I pay great attention to is the chakras. So the chakras, a lot has been said about this, and I've heard a lot of different things. And I took evening courses while I was studying naturopathy in what they called, or my teacher called, Prima Ayurveda, which is the ancient form of Ayurveda. So not the Ayurveda you'd go and learn in a university and sit down kind of all day listening to classes and do a bit of practical work in your third year or something like that. It's more the old-fashioned, like where you'd spend 15 years with a practitioner and you'd learn you'd learn the Ayurveda by osmosis, by living Ayurveda every day. And these is a fascinating subject. Kind of, I'm sure I'll do more talks on this element of it. But the chakra system is pretty incredible, and there's a lot of kind of places in India who still have who this knowledge is very alive. It's just a little bit off the beaten track. It's not in the universities maybe, but it's more in the ashrams. And the reason why it's interesting, and I'll tell you now, is Ayurveda actually means the science of life. It doesn't mean the science of disease, like Ayur, life, Veda, the study of, or the science. It's actually how to be in good health, that's the aim. It's not how to solve a problem, it's how to not have a problem in the first place. And Ayurveda has been around for thousands of years, and it's a brilliant system of explaining health principles to a largely analphabetic society, and I'm talking about thousands and thousands of years, of course. And it's through stories. People would sit around the campfire and tell stories about Ganesha and Shiva, and everybody would hear them all all throughout their life. And they would know the personalities. They knew what the different little kind of deities liked and disliked, and the principles they lived by. And so these chakras are like, in a way, local governments in the body, in the various places, and they each have a little deity that resides in one of them. And if there was an imbalance in a certain area of the body, the practitioner, it was easy for them to say, oh, Ganesha's not very happy with you. So the person would straight away know, oh, well, Ganesha likes me to eat these types of food and likes me to have this lifestyle and doesn't like me to do this and that. And so it was an easy way to explain and bring about a healthy lifestyle without having to go into all the details of kind of microbiology, or they didn't have the details then, I don't think. But it's a fascinating system. So I'll cover in brief some of the principles of these various chakras, and there'll need to be other presentations to go into more depth on these. So we'll start at the bottom of the list here. The base chakra, that's where Ganesha was kind of spending his time. And the key element is being proactive and self-determined. Just imagine like an elephant. Like if it's got something in mind, it's going to get it done. It's going to get past any barrier that's in front of him. And those are the principles that make that area strong. Above that you've got Sarasvati and Lakshmi, and they're into understanding and learning your lessons that life is teaching you. So understanding, like, begin with the end in mind. Like, so know where you're going, and do it creatively. There's a balance between creativity and control. And with control, I mean learning from your lessons, like being kind of diligent. So each chakra has some principles that need to be followed. I'll just briefly go through the other ones. The one above that, you've got Shiva, and he's big into kind of boundaries and priorities, making sure that the most important thing is the most important thing in your life. Above that you've got his mother, Jagadamba, who's into win-win, so that you've got, when you invest your energy, you get a good return on it. You don't kind of give all the time without getting back. If not, you weaken that area. Just think about kind of when you were heartbroken. Like if you were really heartbroken, you lost a big investment. You put a lot of yourself into it, and it does actually feel like your chest actually caves in when you're in that situation. So think of that as your investment kind of center. The throat area is about understanding, and understanding before you act and you talk, so that you can talk your true self. So you have to understand fully the situation before you start acting. Then about values, like making sure that you're working with synchronicity with people around you, making sure that you're aware of their interests and their situation. So just think about this area here is about where your senses are. So you've got your eyes, your ears, your nose, your mouth. This area is about you kind of perceiving what's going on around you, and then the brain is behind it, who's processing it, making you aware of what's going on. And then the top one, which is more a bit of a gateway, kind of where energy comes in, and there's something about kind of upping your game. So just keep on learning, keep on improving yourself, and keep growing up. Now, like I say, there's no way I'm going to be able to talk and give you all the details. When I was learning this stuff, we could spend weeks, like in the evening courses, just on one of these topics. It's a vast area. You spend kind of many years But this is like a taster. Like if you're aware one of your patients has got like some serious chest issues, or like anything going on in this area, try and figure out if there are any kind of losses of energy. Like, are they giving too much, or are they taking too much energy from somebody else and not giving back? There's a balance in there. So food for thought. And just another example is the symbols that you see kind of around these deities. They're all there to actually explain what's going on. So with Ganesha, he's kind of got big ears, so it's good to listen, and he's got a small mouth, so meaning that he doesn't talk much, so it's better to do more listening and less talking. He's got a big head because he thinks, like there's a big element of thinking things clearly. Probably read the details on there, but every single deity, he's got lots of symbols to help people understand and remember what are the principles that are important in that area of the body. And coming back to iridology here, this is quite interesting, and this I haven't actually heard any other practitioners use this type of knowledge and mixing it with iridology, because when I first started off learning about iridology, there'd be quite a few times when I'd see something maybe in the lung area, and I'd ask the person, oh, did you used to smoke, or do you have like chest issues, and they'd say no, and I'd be kind of a bit confused, saying, does this iridology actually work? And then later on, when I started learning more about this, like the chakra system, I was able to kind of start asking questions about non-physical elements but related to the chest area. And the number of times I've had people just open up in tears, kind of going, oh, how do you know? Kind of like, I would say, do you feel like you get a good return on your kind of energy investments with people? And the person would kind of go, oh no, I seem to give, or well, that's just some of the examples. But using this information that you see in the iridology, in your iris photos, and then translating that, first checking in the physical level, but if it doesn't seem to be relevant, start finding clues on the other levels but related to that area, and you'll be surprised with what you can find out. That a lot of research still needs to be done in this, and a bit of a tricky way to do research. There's a project I'm working on that might do this, but more information on that later. But yeah, I think that's quite a lot of food for thought there. So, strategy. So, with fatigue, like I said, it's such a vast area, so many different aspects where fatigue is one of the kind of consequences. Where do you actually begin? And this is like the frame of mind, like to start my strategy. How do you, like, you have a patient that comes to you, and most of the time it's the problem didn't actually start just then or like the week before that. Most of the time the problems people come to see you with, those problems have been around for a while, or they've been to see other practitioners, and they've tried various things, and there might be a whole load of different problems that they have, and they're all mixed together. And just visualize your patient. It's a bit like a big pile of firewood, and if you're trying to pull on one branch, it gets stuck on all the other branches, and it's quite difficult. You're trying to solve one issue, but you're not getting results because you can't really affect it because it's being affected by the other issues. So it's a complex situation. And the part of my strategy, I always go into diet. And diet, for some reason, or there's a lot of reasons, but seems to lighten the issue. It seems to bring clarity to the situation. There's a thing I call the baseline diet. This is part of the training I had, which is putting somebody on a baseline diet, which means if something is just too complex and the situation, you don't know how to get started with it, is start with a really simple diet. And I mean kind of fruit and veg, and that's it. Like, I wouldn't even put nuts or grains in there. I'd cut out on the oils, no meat, no dairy. Cut it all out, all the heavy elements, the more difficult to digest type foods, take them all out for, I'd say, at least 10 days. And it's a bit of a challenge, but that seems to start clarifying things. Now, if the origin of the problem was on an emotional level, you'll start having that emotional kind of issue come up to the top much more easily. If it's a physical thing, well, a clean, like a cleansing diet like that is going to start detoxing, and you're going to have some clarity as to what's going on in the body there. So just diet, like, I'll talk hours on this, but diet is one of the key elements to add in your strategy. And most of the time, like, diet isn't, like, it doesn't mean that's the origin of the problem. It can often be the problem, but the problem is often on an emotional level, like some kind of traumatic experience. And when I mean traumatic experience, it could be something that may not seem traumatic, like somebody who wants to do something and their boss or their partner says, no, you can't. Just that energy of no, it was a real block sometimes. There's an emotional kind of hiccup in there, and that hiccup can be like have a snowball effect that brings about a lot more problems in the long run. But anyway, diet often lightens things up to start having more deeper understanding in this. And then obviously, like the things I said earlier, which is the finding out which area is depository, malignant, wasting away type situation. So on what level is the origin? You may not know, but it's something to pay attention to. And what area of the body, and that's the chakras come in there, and what it can, and you can figure out the other areas of their life that need attention, so not just the physical area. Anyway, so in my strategy, this is the areas that I'm going to have to pay attention to. And then I move on to iridology. Now, like I said, it's a vast area, fatigue, but there are some things that are pretty obvious when it comes to fatigue. So you look at the size of the pupil, and if your kind of practice room isn't extremely bright or extremely dark, the size of the pupil gives you a lot of information that has a lot of influence on how their inner state is. So if a person's pupils are very dilated, and they shouldn't be that dilated, there's some kind of sympathetic element dominating their situation, and that's a big thing. Kind of, if they've got fatigue and that's going on, like, you know that when the sympathetic nervous system is kind of dominating in a way, you know that the digestive system can't be working in its best situation. You have to have like the relax and digest parasympathetic system going on to properly process the food and properly absorb the minerals. So that's something that I pay attention to. And that you can see that, like, you don't even need an iriscope for that to be obvious. And the other one that's pretty big, quite common, is adrenal fatigue. And that in the iris, you can actually see that quite easily. Now if you look at this picture here, like if you can see my mouse there, it's the one that's exactly at 6 o'clock, touching the collarette, or the A&W. And in this patient here, you can see like a series of small lacunas, disturbances, and creating like a weaker area in the iris, all the way down to the outside of the iris. Now that's a typical sign. There's lots of other iris signs for the adrenals, but that's one of them. It's this area that you'll be seeing signs, and that's something you pay attention to. And there's a lot that can be said about adrenal fatigue, but figure out, like, are they a big coffee user? Because coffee is like the button that helps you press on your adrenals to release adrenaline to give you more energy. But adrenaline is something that your adrenals exist. Well, we were developed in humans to be able to give you a fighting chance if a saber-toothed tiger would jump out the bushes, and you have to be able to run very fast or run up a tree or give you superhuman strength. That's what they're there for, and it's for short bursts occasionally, not every day, like being stressed, kind of using lots of coffee. That it's easy to fatigue the adrenals. So that's one area with fatigue that I pay close attention to. There's other areas that are very important as well, is the whole digestive tract, how they digest, how they eat. Do they eat in a relaxed state? Anyway, digestion is a whole nother topic, but there's a lot of things going on there, and that's kind of how the energy is coming into the body. And if there's some disturbance there, in Ayurveda there's one of the poems, like how Ayurveda was communicated was through poems, and one of them is about start with the digestion. It's the cornerstone of health. Is first you figure out that the digestion is sorted, and then you start working on other things. Don't start working on other aspects of health if you haven't at least got some clarity on the digestive element. The liver, a big area. Hormones, another big area. Another one which I'm paying a bit more attention to, and I'm hoping more research gets done into this, is how the mitochondria, like the health of the mitochondria, because that's where the energy, that's the energy power source of all the cells, and how sugar is processed into energy. It's the mitochondria that take the glucose and transform it, take the energy that's stored in the glucose and transform ADP into ATP. So adenine diphosphate has got two phosphates on it, sorry. And to add a third phosphate to it requires energy, and then there's energy stored in that molecule. So there's some theories about the body not processing and creating ATP in an efficient way. And this could be one of the causes, or it's one of the theories about chronic fatigue, because it's quite difficult to figure out. But anyway, it's an area that I'm paying attention to. And I think, I haven't got solutions to it, but I think digestion and feeling of well-being, feeling enthusiastic in life, that has a big influence on that process. But that's just my theory. I've got no proof on that. With chronic fatigue, you're often looking at a combination of areas, but this is a chronic fatigue person, and there's some pretty interesting aspects of it. You've got like the digestive system, like the white rings around the small intestine there, or around the pupil, which point to the small intestine. That's a big area that needs attention. And if you can see at around about 2 o'clock and about 10 o'clock in the right eye, so here on the left, you can see some like discolorations in that area. And if you go back to the chakra system, that corresponds to the throat and third eye, what they call that eye. So it's these two areas that are being involved here, and it's all about understanding and perception. And one of the things that I've noticed, not all the time, but often with chronic fatigue, there's often an externalization of their problems. So not taking ownership of their situation, meaning that the problem is due to something outside of them, which in a way makes it incapable for them to take on the problem and to solve the problem, because it's not in them. So that there's a low command over their environment, and there's often like low enthusiasm, and possibly an environment where there are people or elements in their environment that are undermining them, that are kind of sucking their energy or weakening their situation. So their environment is another big area that needs attention with chronic fatigue. So to like conclude in a way, it's interesting to bear in mind that humans have only lived in big cities and stressful jobs and things like that. Well, stressful jobs, humans have always had a lot of stress, but their environment has been very different to the environment we live in today. And we haven't evolved, like we don't evolve in the matter of a few hundred years. It takes a lot longer. And being aware that we're still actually very animal-like, like very... we're part of nature, even though we live inside and we've got heating and we've got lighting and we can isolate ourselves from the environment, but we are still affected by it. And it's quite important to pay attention to the seasons and the environment in which we live. And like if it's autumn, it's a time of gathering resources and going quiet, and winter's a time for reflection and a lot of sleeping. But spring and is a time of growth and activity and being busy. And like our boss doesn't care whether it's kind of winter and doesn't care that you want to sleep. He still wants you to get the work done. The thing is, you have to pay attention to your health, because getting an imbalance, getting a fatigue issue, like a serious problem, will minimize your effectiveness in the long run. So paying attention, this is a big area to be aware of, and try and get your patient to be aware of as well, is to be back in, like, stay in contact with their animal or like their nature part. So as practitioners, this is like a doctor, like the original meaning of the word doctor meant you were somebody who had enough knowledge to be able to teach. And in university, you get it. If you want to get a doctorate, you actually have to do some teaching. That's part of the requirement. So, as a naturopathic doctor, teach this stuff. Teach them how to get back into balance. Don't just prescribe kind of herbs or something like that. The biggest element is re-education, and you probably all know this and put it into practice. But I thought ending on that element is big, because getting them back into ownership of their own situation, their own life, and they can kind of conduct their life, brings about a lot of good results usually. So anyway, so if you've got any questions, don't hesitate to send me an email. And if you want to be part of, or if you want to hear more presentations or podcasts like this, subscribe to the newsletter. Or it's not ready just yet, but send me an email. Great, thanks a lot.